Was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? Maybe it was because she was quiet. Maybe it was because she was the only woman in the room. Or maybe because deep down they were afraid she'd be right. Chief Petty Officer Stella Adams sat in the back row of a windowless room that didn't officially exist. The air smelled like burnt coffee and nerves. Around her, a dozen men in unmarked uniforms studied a screen that flickered with satellite images of a place no map dared to name, the fractured lands. A voice cut through the silence, cold, measured, female. "Doctor," said the woman at the front, known only as Control. The photo that appeared on screen showed a sharp-featured woman in her 40s, eyes that looked like they could calculate the world. Former NSA cryptographer. 3 days ago, she walked out of fort with nuclear launch authentication codes. The room went dead quiet. Nobody breathed. Control continued. "Those codes represent nearly 40% of our land-based missile arsenal. She's on the run, selling to the highest bidder." A man in the front, Lieutenant Commander Reed, Stella's team leader, leaned forward. "How did she get them?" "She built a into the rotation system 2 years ago," Control replied, her face unreadable. "Used it before we caught it. Now she's disappeared into the wind." The next image that flickered onto the screen didn't look real. A patch of earth, so it seemed God himself had struck it with a hammer. "The fractured lands," Control said. 200 square kilometers of seismic hell, where 3 borders meet and none claim ownership. Stella studied it closely. The terrain looked impossible, canyons twisting in chaotic directions, shadows cutting through rock like veins of darkness. "Why would she go there?" Stella asked quietly. Control looked at her. "Because it's the perfect place to disappear. No government, no oversight. Drones lose signal. Satellites show static. Even the locals say the ground itself doesn't like being looked at." A few chuckles scattered the room, but not from Stella. She'd seen places like that, places that swallowed men whole. Control pointed at the screen again. "She's planning extraction here." She zoomed into a plateau surrounded by canyon walls in 48 hours. "That's our window." Reed crossed his arms. "We go in, get her, get out." "Not quite," Control said. "Terrain makes conventional assault impossible. GPS unreliable, radio intermittent. You'll need overwatch. A single clean shot before she reaches that helicopter." All eyes turned toward Stella. At 32, she had a reputation, the kind whispered about in ranges and briefings. She didn't miss. Not because she was lucky, because she didn't believe in luck. She believed in math, and patience, and stillness. "Chief Adams," Control asked, "can you make that shot?" Stella looked at the terrain data. 1 mile distance, 1,600 meters across shifting winds, magnetic anomalies, seismic tremors. Everything about it screamed impossible. She took a slow breath. "I can make it," she said, "but I'll need my spotter, Chief. 2 minutes on target before engagement." "You'll have it." The mission was set. That night she lay awake in her quarters, the hum of the ventilation sounding like wind through canyon walls. Her rifle, cleaned twice already, rested against the bunk. Sleep wouldn't come. Her mind replayed Control's words. Impossible shot. People always said that. Impossible. But she'd learned something years ago. Impossible wasn't a fact, it was a lack of courage. Still, there was something different about this one. The fractured lands weren't just hostile, they were alive, breathing, moving. And she'd be lying if she said it didn't make her uneasy. She thought of Doctor, the woman she'd be ordered to kill. Once she'd been one of them, a patriot, a protector of secrets. Somewhere, something inside her must cracked. What makes someone turn against everything they've sworn to defend? That question lingered. Because Stella knew, given enough loss, enough betrayal, anyone could break. At dawn found her on the range, firing into the wind. "You ever sleep?" he asked. Not before a mission like this. He grinned, tired eyes under a ball cap. Good, then we'll both be miserable together. They went over every possible variable: wind velocity, terrain shifts, seismic intervals. Had pulled data showing gusts up to 60 miles per hour. Canyon walls accelerate the wind, he said. Direction changes every 30 seconds. GPS is useless. We'll have to go old school. So instinct, she replied. He nodded. And timing. The ground tremors every 20 minutes. You'll need to shoot between them. Guess I'll need to feel the earth breathe, she murmured. 36 hours later, the cut through pre-dawn darkness, flying low through mountain passes. The pilots wore no insignia. The mission didn't exist. 30 seconds, the crew chief called. The chopper hovered just above the canyon floor. The team fast-roped down, boots slamming rock. Within seconds, the helicopter disappeared into the dark, and silence closed in like a physical weight. The fractured lands lived up to their name. The earth was broken, split by jagged ravines and rock formations jutting at impossible angles. It felt like walking on the bones of something ancient and angry. They moved in tactical silence, Stella fourth in line, rifle cradled across her chest. Night vision painted the world in ghostly green. 2 hours in, the ground shifted under her boots. A low rumble rolled through the canyon. The team froze. Tremor whispered, 2.5, maybe 3. It passed, but the unease didn't. By sunrise, they reached the observation point, a narrow ridge overlooking a canyon basin, the designated landing zone. From here, she could see everything. A flat stretch of rock surrounded by canyon walls on all sides, nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. Range 1680 meters, reported. Target area 200 feet below our position. Through her scope, she saw dust devils twist across the basin, small bushes bending in opposing directions. Wind, endless, unpredictable wind. 3 different air currents, she murmured. Crosswind from the east, downdraft from the canyon and along the rim. Exhaled, you're not making this easy. I don't do easy. They settled into position, rifle resting on a pack, scope glinting faintly in morning light. The others spread out, securing the perimeter. Then came the hardest part, waiting. Sniping wasn't about pulling a trigger, it was about patience. The kind that broke lesser people. Hours staring through glass, memorizing wind behavior, shadow movement, terrain rhythm. By mid-morning, clouds began to gather, and the wind picked up. The canyon whistled like a warning. You think she's scared? Asked softly. Stella replied, not lifting her eye from the scope. Scared people run, she's still coming. Why'd she do it, you think? Sell out her country? Stella didn't answer. Because deep down, she wasn't sure the line between loyalty and betrayal was as clear as they wanted it to be. Maybe hadn't betrayed anyone. Maybe she just stopped believing in people who betrayed her first. The thought stuck, like a splinter she couldn't pull free. Hours later, as the sun climbed, the radio cracked alive. All stations command. Target confirmed en route. ETA 20 minutes. Extraction helicopter inbound from the south 5 minutes after target arrival. Copy, Reed replied from below. Stella's pulse slowed, controlled, trained. Her world narrowed to the scope. She whispered to wind check. 28 miles an hour, gusting to 35. Direction unstable. Then I'll read it live. 15 minutes passed. Nothing but wind and static. Then movement. Through her scope, Stella saw them emerge from the eastern passage, 5 figures moving tactically. 4 guards, 1 woman in the middle. Doctor. At this distance, her features blurred, but her posture was confident, defiant even. The titanium case was chained to her wrist, glinting under the sun. I have visual, Stella said quietly. Target on the LZ. The security team spread out, weapons raised, professionals, not amateurs. Wind roared across the canyon, then fell still for a heartbeat. Cycle about 20 seconds, murmured. 15 of gusts, 5 calm. Then I'll shoot in the silence. Through the scope, Stella watched scan the sky, waiting for salvation in the form of a helicopter that wasn't there yet. Her mind quieted. Everything outside the crosshairs faded, fear, memory, doubt. Only the shot remained. She felt the wind drop, the air go still. But the earth trembled beneath her. A low rumble, stronger this time, the sight picture blurred. Tremor hissed, magnitude 3.5. Stella didn't move, didn't breathe, waited for the ground to settle. Hadn't moved either. She was talking to someone, gesturing, agitated. "How long until the bird?" Stella whispered. "Any second," said, "but if she moves for cover, we lose her." Then faint, rising, the sound of rotors. The helicopter appeared, sweeping over the southern rim like a mechanical predator. Looked up, relief washing over her face. And in that instant, Stella knew, the window was closing. The helicopter was a gray shadow against the light, rotors chopping the storm air into chaos. Wind screamed through the canyon, whipping dust into spirals that blurred everything. Stella's finger hovered on the trigger. 1 mile away, the woman she had to stop stood in the open, clutching a case that could end the world. "Wind's up," murmured. 40 miles per hour, shifting northwest to east. She's moving toward center LZ. Stella didn't answer. Her breathing slowed to half speed. The world collapsed to a circle of glass and crosshairs. Took measured steps, hair pulled tight, face unreadable. The titanium case caught the light like a flare. The storm hit harder. The canyon moaned. Rocks rattled around her hide. Somewhere behind them, Reed whispered into the radio, calling final positions, readying extraction. Then said softly, "Rotor wash incoming. Once that bird lands, the air goes crazy. You'll lose the shot." "Then I take it before it lands." She waited, tracking the rhythm of the gusts, the 20-second cycle she'd mapped for hours. Gust, calm, gust, calm. Each one like a heartbeat. Strong, weak, strong. The next calm was coming. Stopped walking, standing almost exactly where the helicopter would touch down. Stella felt the earth shift again, the faint vibration through her elbows, a tremor, not big but big enough. She waited it out, ground still shaking, heart not. "Range 1685 called. Wind cycle calm in 3-2 now." The air dropped still, clean. Stella exhaled. Pressed. The suppressed rifle cracked, a sound swallowed by the storm. For 2.5 seconds the bullet flew, a streak of brass and intention, bending, rising, falling through invisible rivers of air. Then impact. Through the scope she saw his body jerk, knees buckle, eyes wide in the moment between life and nothing. She collapsed onto the rock, the case clanging against stone. "Hit confirmed," whispered. For a breath the world was silent, then chaos. The guards shouted, weapons raised, scanning canyon rims that held only ghosts. The helicopter flared, pilot reacting, pulling up hard. Dust exploded across the landing zone. "Recovery team stand by," Control's voice snapped over comms. "Sierra team maintain overwatch." But Stella's work wasn't done. One of the guards sprinted towards body, shouting, dragging her wrist up. The chain snapped, the case came free. He hugged it to his chest and ran. "Secondary target has the case," Stella reported. "Male, 6 foot, black gear heading east." "Can you take him?" Control asked. Stella tracked him through her scope. He ran low, fast, weaving through rocks, using bodies for cover. Wind tore across the canyon wild, unpredictable, the sky alive with grit. "Negative," she said. "Shot probability 30%, winds chaos." "Stella," Reed's voice cut in, urgent. "If he hits that passage, he's gone. Those codes go with him." 30%. She trained her whole life never to take that shot. Instinct was a liar, instructors said. Calculation was truth. But sometimes, instinct was all you had left. Her eyes followed the man. He had 5 seconds before cover, maybe 6. She didn't think, she felt. Range, wind, movement, all there, buried in the muscle memory of 10,000 hours behind glass and steel. She squeezed. Recoil echo, then the impossible. The man right into the bullet's path. The impact spun him sideways. The case flew from his hands, tumbling through dust before landing in a puff near a rock. Hit, yelled, he's down, case on the ground. Through her scope, Stella saw him still moving, wounded, crawling, but not going anywhere. The rest of his team froze, staring at the fallen case. A second helicopter appeared, unmarked, silent until it was almost overhead. Fast ropes dropped. Operators slid down in fluid motion, grabbing the titanium case, securing his body. Recovery team has it, Control said. All hostiles retreating, mission success. But Stella didn't lower her rifle. She kept covering the team, eyes cold, steady. Only when she saw the all-clear signal did she breathe again. Sat back, shaking his head. 2 kills, 1.7 miles, 40-mile gusts. You just redefined impossible. Stella's voice was calm. It was necessary. She allowed herself a thin smile, and maybe a little lucky. Laughed once. Luck's what happens when preparation meets opportunity. By the time the recovery team reached their extraction chopper, the canyon was quiet again. Wind eased, clouds parted, the fractured lands looked almost peaceful. But Stella couldn't shake the image of falling, so sudden, so final. There hadn't even been fear in her eyes, just surprise. What had she been thinking in that last moment? Relief? Regret? Maybe she thought she'd made the world safer by selling its secrets. Maybe she'd convinced herself betrayal was salvation. The more Stella tried to hate her, the more she couldn't. She remembered something her first instructor had said years ago. Snipers see death closer than anyone, but never close enough to understand it. Now she understood what he meant. The flight out was silent except for rotor hum. Stella sat near the open door, helmet off, wind tearing through her hair. The broken landscape below looked like a scar running across the earth. Reed moved down the aisle and sat beside her. You know those shots are going to become legend, right? She gave him a sideways look. That's the problem with legends, they make people forget the cost. Reed smiled faintly. Still, 2 extreme-range hits in those conditions. That second one's going to be in training manuals for decades. She didn't answer. Listen, he continued, softer. I've been doing this 17 years. I've seen things I still can't explain. But what you did today, it changes how people think about possibility. The shots were possible because I didn't think they were impossible, she said quietly. Everything can be broken down, distance, wind, time. Master the variables and you master the shot. Reed chuckled. I'm stealing that for my next leadership talk. She looked back out over the landscape, voice almost a whisper. But you can't calculate what happens after. That's the part no one tells you. He studied her a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. When he left, leaned across the aisle. You okay? You've been quiet since we lifted off. She hesitated. I'm processing. Processing what? The fact that I just took 2 lives, from a mile away. One of them used to protect what we protect. The other, he was just doing his job. Nodded slowly. That's what makes you good, Stella. You don't forget there's a person on the other end. Some snipers start seeing silhouettes instead of souls. You never have. The day it becomes easy, she said, is the day I walk away. He smiled faintly. Let's hope that day never comes. Hours later, base lights glittered in the distance. The helicopter banked, descending toward the landing pad. The team filed out in silence, mission gear still dusty, boots heavy. Inside the debriefing room, they gave statements, handed over weapons, logged every technical detail. Stella wrote it all down. Distance, wind, elevation, humidity. Cold data that couldn't capture the pulse of those 2.4 seconds when the world hung on a bullet's flight. When the reports were done, she walked out into the night. The air was still, no wind, no sound. She stared up at the stars, sharp, clear, unbothered by human chaos. Somewhere out there, politicians and generals would turn tonight's work into numbers and files. But to her, it wasn't numbers, it was faces. The guards, every person who'd carried a piece of this mission. Her chest felt heavy, but not with regret, with something quieter, a kind of solemn gratitude that the world still held people willing to do the ugly work so others could sleep in peace. Sometimes dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't demand medals or names carved in stone. It just acts. She turned toward the barracks, the distant sound of aircraft engines fatting behind her. Tomorrow there would be new orders, another target, another place where the wind refused to obey reason. But tonight she allowed herself to simply be human, breathing, tired, alive. And somewhere deep inside, beyond the discipline and steel, she felt the smallest flicker of peace. The metal box lay unopened on her bunk, a small rectangle of velvet, the kind that meant more to other people than to the one who earned it. Stella stared at it for a long time, then turned it. It wasn't pride she felt, it was static, the kind that hums under your skin when silence is too loud. 3 days had passed since the fractured lands. 3 days of briefings, reports, and quiet nods from superiors who would never say her name out loud. The mission was labeled essential, the shots flawless. And yet she hadn't slept more than an hour at a time. Why did she keep hearing the wind? It came back in dreams, the howl through the canyon, the weight of the trigger, the way the earth trembled beneath her when she fired. In those dreams, the bullet never reached the target. It just kept flying, forever, through endless wind. She would wake up before it landed, always before. That morning knocked on her door. Debrief follow-up in 15. Command wants to go over your data again. Again. He shrugged. Your shot broke half their models. They can't figure out how the math works. She smiled faintly, maybe because it wasn't math. Hesitated, studying her face. You good? She didn't lie, not really. Yeah, me neither. They walked the sterile hall to the operations center, walls lined with screens replaying fragments of the mission. Wind readings, seismic graphs, ballistic traces. On one display, the bullet's projected path, an elegant curve of physics and fate, glowed in blue light. Control was there, as unreadable as ever. Chief Adams, she said, gesturing toward the graph. You compensated for 35-mile-per-hour gusts, a 4-degree thermal shift, and a microquake in the same shot. That shouldn't be possible. Yet it happened. Control's eyes flicked up. How? Stella paused. I stopped trying to control the chaos. I let it pass through me instead of fighting it. The woman studied her a moment longer, then nodded once. That'll be all. As they turned to leave, Control added quietly, You saved millions, Chief. Don't forget that. But Stella did forget. Or maybe she couldn't feel it. Heroism sounded noble in rooms like this, under clean light and cold air. Out there, it just felt like survival. That evening she went to the range. Empty now, wind sweeping across concrete. She set her rifle down, aimed at nothing, and listened. Every sniper learns to measure silence, between breaths, between heartbeats. But this silence was different, it had weight. Still haunted, a voice said behind her. Reed, hands in pockets, face lined with fatigue. She didn't turn. You ever wonder if we're saving the right world? He stepped beside her, following her gaze downrange. Every mission. But the world's not a clean thing, Adams. You don't get to choose which part's worth saving. You just do the job. Even when the job kills pieces of you. He exhaled, especially then. They stood like that for a while, two soldiers staring into nothing, each fighting ghosts the other couldn't see. Reed finally spoke again. Command offering you a teaching post, advanced sniper school, stateside. She blinked. You mean out of field? For a while, yeah. After what you pulled off, you could write the next doctrine, or disappear into a classroom where nobody knows what you've done. She thought about it, a life without the wind, without the tremors, without the impossible, but also without the purpose that made her breathe. I'll think about it, she said. That night the storm returned, not in the sky but in her head. She dreamed of again. Only this time wasn't running. She was sitting at a desk, calm, typing lines of code. When she looked up, she said, I wasn't betraying anyone, Stella. I was trying to stop them. Then thunder, a gunshot, and eyes open, questioning, as if asking, was I wrong? Stella woke drenched in sweat. She sat on the edge of the bed until dawn. At breakfast, slid into the seat across from her. You look like you fought a bear. I fought myself. He smirked gently. Who won? Ask me tomorrow. He hesitated. They're sending the after-action team back to the fractured lands. Environmental survey, recovery check. They want you to review their ballistic sensors before they go. Her fork froze halfway up, back there. Just analysis, no boots on the ground for you. But something inside her tightened. She didn't know if it was dread or need. Later that day, she found herself alone in the simulation room, watching reconstructed footage of her own shots. Computer models showed vectors, drift, spin drift, even bullet yaw mid-flight. Numbers overlaid the image like cold constellations. At the end of the playback, the system projected a 3D model of the canyon. The bullet's path glowed like a silver thread through wind fields rendered in color, red for turbulence, blue for calm. And in that thread's end point, a human figure fell. She stepped closer. The simulation froze at the exact moment the bullet struck. Her breath hitched. The computer didn't know guilt. It didn't register hesitation or conscience. It just plotted impact. But she saw it, the life in that frame, the fragility, the futility. She whispered, almost to herself, what if necessary isn't the same as right? Nobody answered. 2 days later, a sealed envelope arrived. Reassignment orders, stateside training command, pending acceptance. She sat in the mess hall, turning it over in her hands, when dropped a tray beside her. You gonna open that or keep staring at it till it dissolves? She tore it open, read silently. Well, they want me to teach. He grinned. Congratulations, that's a hell of a compliment. She folded the paper, slid it back into the envelope. Feels more like exile. You're allowed to rest, Stella. You've done your part. She shook her head slowly. You ever feel like the moment you stop, everything you did starts to mean less? Studied her. You're not a weapon, you know. You're a person who happens to be really good with one. She gave him a tired smile. You sound like my conscience. Someone gotta audition for the role. They laughed quietly, but underneath both knew the truth. Once you've lived through something like that, normal never feels real again. That night she packed her gear. Rifle disassembled, cleaned, stowed. Uniform folded with ritual precision. But when she reached for her sniper logbook, the small, worn notebook filled with ballistic tables and scribbled notes, she stopped. On one page, she'd written weeks earlier. Every shot can be broken down into variables. Range, wind, movement, terrain. Master the variables, master the shot. She stared at the words, then added underneath almost as an afterthought. But not the heart. She closed the book. Before lights out, she walked outside, past the hangars and fuel trucks, toward the perimeter fence. Beyond it, desert stretched to the horizon, heat shimmering even in the night. Wind again, gentle this time. She let it wash over her face. She realized she didn't hate the wind anymore. It wasn't the enemy. It was a reminder of fragility, of precision, of what it meant to be alive in chaos. A week later, she boarded a transport plane home. was already assigned elsewhere. Reed had gone back into the field. Control had vanished into whatever black site she came from. When the engines roared to life, Stella closed her eyes. For the first time in days, she let herself drift. In her half-sleep, she heard a voice not Reed, her own. You don't believe in impossible shots. You believe in necessary ones. But what if necessity is just the word we use to make peace with what we can't undo? The thought lingered as the plane climbed through clouds. She didn't know if she was leaving the battlefield behind, or if it would follow her forever. All she knew was that every time she closed her eyes, she could still see that silver thread slicing through wind, a perfect line through chaos, straight and true, and impossibly heavy. She looked out the window. The horizon was bleeding orange, dawn breaking somewhere over the Atlantic. Somewhere below, the fractured lands were already being reclaimed by dust and silence. The canyon that had swallowed so much sound now held only echoes. And in that quiet, if you listened close enough, you could almost believe the earth was healing. Maybe that was enough. The classroom smelled like oil and dust. Dozens of rifles rested on the benches, sunlight slipping through the high windows, catching on steel. Chief Petty Officer Stella Adams stood at the front, watching a room full of young snipers in training, faces unlined, eyes full of questions they didn't yet know how to ask. Range and wind are the variables, she said. Her voice was low, even. But the hardest variable to master is yourself. They watched her like she was a myth. Maybe she was, in their world, a story whispered across bases, the woman who'd made the impossible shot. She pointed at the target downrange. Don't chase perfection, chase clarity. The moment before you fire, when the world goes still, that's when you'll know if you deserve the shot. A pause, wind rustled the flags outside. She could still hear it, that same wind, every time she spoke about silence. After the session, one of the recruits lingered, barely 20, nervous. Chief, they say you made a shot no one else could. How'd you do it? She smiled faintly, by forgetting the legend. He frowned. I don't get it. You can't hit what you worship, she said. The moment you start believing you're part of some story, you stop listening to the wind. The kid nodded, still not understanding. He would someday, when he'd lived long enough to know that legends cost more than they give. Weeks passed. Routine crept in, mornings on the range, afternoons in the classroom, nights alone with the echo of memory. On paper, she'd adjusted well. She ran, trained, taught, filed her reports. But at night, the same dream returned. A canyon, a bullet that never stopped flying. One evening showed up at the training facility unannounced. Same grin, same tired eyes. Long time, he said. She raised an eyebrow. They send you to check if I'm still breathing. More like to thank you. They a fragment of the mission. Officially, it doesn't have your name, but everyone in our circle knows. He placed a small drive on her desk. Footage from the recovery team's body cams. Thought you might want closure. She stared at the device for a long time. Closure, she repeated. That's a funny word. He shrugged. It's the best the military's got. When he left, she sat there in the dark, the tiny drive gleaming like temptation. She told herself not to open it. Then she did. The footage was rough, shaky, grainy chaos rendered in pixels. Operators shouting, dust swirling. Then, for a moment, the camera tilted just enough for her to see herself, distant, a ghost on the canyon rim. A flash, a second flash, and then silence. She watched fall again, but the camera caught something her scope hadn't. The scientist's eyes, open for a heartbeat before closing. There was no hatred there, only resignation. Stella paused the video. The room was still. For a long time she just sat, breathing slow, steady, as if lining up another shot she didn't want to take. Then she whispered, "You were trying to do what you thought was right, weren't you?" And for the first time since that day, she felt the tears, not dramatic, not cinematic, just quiet and real. Months later, she received a letter. No rank, no insignia, just a government seal. Inside, a short note from Control. Your analysis helped rewrite long-range doctrine. You've saved lives before they were ever in danger. History won't record it, but that's how the best work is done. Below that, a single sentence handwritten in ink. I hope you found peace in the wind. She folded the letter and placed it in her logbook, between the pages that held her final calculations. Peace in the wind. Maybe that was the closest anyone like her could get. That winter, she took leave and drove north. No uniform, no weapons, just a truck, a pack, and the silence of her own company. She followed roads until they turned to dirt, and dirt until it ended. She camped near a cliff that overlooked a valley, nothing like the fractured lands, but the wind there had a similar song. At dawn, she hiked to the edge. The world below was quiet, snow resting on rock. She knelt, closed her eyes, and listened. No mission, no command voice, just the breath of the earth. People talked about snipers like they were machines, calculating, cold, detached. But the truth was the opposite. You couldn't make a shot like that unless you felt everything: the air, the temperature, the heartbeat of the ground. That was her secret. Feeling didn't make her weaker, it made her precise. She opened her notebook one last time. On the last blank page, she wrote, "The wind isn't the enemy. It's the conversation between the world and the bullet, between what we can control and what we can't." She stared at the words until the page blurred. Then she closed the book and set it beside her. Later that day, a group of hikers passed her camp. One of them recognized her from the training videos, an older vet teaching recruits how to breathe before they shoot. "Hey, Chief Adams," the man said, "you really hit a target from over a mile away, right? Through a storm." She smiled, polite. "That's what they say." "What was it like?" She thought for a long time before answering. "It felt quiet," she said, "like the whole world paused to see if I deserved the moment." The man nodded slowly, not sure what she meant. He thanked her for her service and walked on. Stella watched them disappear into the trees. She didn't correct him. Some stories were better left as stories. That night, as the fire crackled and the wind whispered through the branches, she found herself talking softly, to no one, or maybe two. "You know," she said, "I still don't know if what I did was justice or just obedience. But I hope wherever you are, the storm's finally over." A faint gust lifted the ashes from the fire and scattered them into the dark. She smiled. "Yeah, thought so." When spring came, she went back to the academy. Her students had doubled. Someone had painted her name on the wall of honor, next to the quote Reed had stolen. "The only impossible shots are the ones you don't take." She stood there a long moment, reading it. Then she picked up a marker and added a line beneath it. "But some shots take pieces you never get back." The recruits noticed it the next day. No one erased it. Years later, stories about her became legend. The woman who hit through the storm. Most of them missed the truth, that the real battle wasn't in the canyon but inside her, between duty and doubt. But that's how legends work. They simplify what should stay complicated. Sometimes she'd hear those stories secondhand: bars, reunions, veterans' halls. She'd smile, sip her drink, and let the myths breathe. She didn't correct them. Because she'd learned something. When people need hope, they don't need your confession, they need your silence. One evening, near the end of her teaching tour, she sat alone on the range again. The recruits were gone. The wind was calm. She assembled her rifle, not for practice, but for ritual. Lying prone, she looked through the scope, not at a target, but at the far horizon, the line where the earth met the sky. She didn't fire, she just breathed. The world tilted into that stillness again, the same stillness she'd felt before the impossible shot. Only this time there was no mission, no countdown, no one to save or kill. Just stillness. She closed her eyes. Somewhere the wind changed direction. And she smiled. The next morning, the range officer found her notebook still open on the bench. On the final page, in careful handwriting, were the words she'd left for anyone who came after. Precision isn't the absence of emotion. It's what happens when emotion learns discipline. Wind will always move. The earth will always shake. Take the shot anyway because someone has to. And below that, one last line.